Hello, my name is Daniel Medmoni Ziegler, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about universal cooperation. I will be assessing the company's past performance and be using those assessments in order to forecast its future income statement and to basically talk about the company's overall performance. Universal Corporation is a tobacco company, but it does not manufacture cigarettes. It basically provides leaf or tobacco products, or I would say supplies, to cigarette manufacturers. And as such, it has quite a bit of customers. It was established in Virginia in 1918. It has been listed on the New York Stock Exchange since 1927. The company has multiple operations, international operations. Back in the 30s, they mostly operated in China and Canada. They expanded to 4 continents by 1960. They started operations in Brazil in 1970. They currently operate in more than 30 countries. And also they are pretty, I would say, innovative. Back in 1958, they started a new scientific lab, and it was considered pretty innovative back then in the days. And the company announced a 45th consecutive annual increase in common stock dividends in 2015. Basically, dividends are keep on increasing and increasing, which is a good detail to mention. And the company's stock has grown by more than 1,000% over the years. Another thing, it's regarding the operations of the company. And Universal Corporation has multiple, I would say, acquisitions and partnerships. They partner with Dutch and German companies, which they allow them obviously to expand their operations. And one of the partnerships, I believe it was the German company, yeah, it allowed Universal Corporation to expand into Brazil. The company had at least 3 acquisitions of companies. Um, the partnerships are, most of them are in Europe, I would say, Italy, Turkey, Greece, in South America, as I mentioned, in Brazil. And also the company has several plants and subsidiaries in Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Canada. And this is the historical income statement from 2018 to 2020. So at first, I would like to mention that the company is somewhat volatile when it comes to its sales. And we can see here in 2018 that the revenues are increasing in 2019, but then decreasing. The cost of goods sold, they are actually increasing from 2018 to 2019, but then they decrease. And there are some payments like the restructuring and impairment costs. They start at 0, then they increased to 20,000, and then they decreased to 7,000. The operating expense is increasing, and the operating income is decreasing. And another thing is that the interest expense of the company has increased over the years, so the company is supposedly borrowing more money. Net income from 2018 to 2020 has decreased, so from 105,000 to 71,000. And by the way, those figures are in thousands, so we need to multiply them by 1,000, so we get basically 105 million, 71 million, and so on. On the right, I have the percentage change. So we can see that, yeah, Revenues increased by 9.5%, but then they decreased by 14%. Cost of goods sold increased, which it's not a good thing, but then they decreased. However, they decreased in 2020, but net income in 2020 is lower. And we can see here that both net income in 2019 and 2020 decreased. So in 2019 it decreased by almost 2%, and in 2020 it decreased by more than 30%. So the company is somewhat again fluctuated when it comes to its sales, and it's important mentioning that it's fluctuated when it comes to its sales. As I just mentioned, this is another detail. Sales from 2018 to 2019 increased by 9.5%, yet net income decreased by 0.70%. Sales from 2018 to 2020 decreased by 14%, and net income decreased by 0.88%. Cost of goods sold increased from 2018 to 2019, but then they decreased in the following year. And there are some specific items like restructuring and impairment, for which costs they started low at 0. I don't know how, but it's according to the company's income statement. And then they increased to 20,000, which is a lot. And then they decreased to 7,000. So there is a great variance. And for this item specifically, I decided to carry it over onto the next time period, because there was just a great variance and I just didn't know how to account for this variance. Also, loans and borrowings, they increased over the years. So the company, as I just said, it probably borrows more money. Tax rate is pretty much consistent, around 30%. And there is an overall decline in sales and net income, and we are going to see it. There are just ups and downs with regard to sales. And of course, sales is not the only factor, but for this specific forecast, I used sales of the past 10 years. And for the future forecast, I used the linear model. So to begin with, all models, they had a similar R squared of around 70%. And all of them predicted that the company's sales would increase in 2021, but then there would be a decrease in the next 2 years. So this trend, I would even call it a cycle, continues. The company has increases in sales, and then they are followed by decreases in sales, and it just keeps on going like this, at least for the past 10 years. It might be even longer, but I use the past 10 years. And as for the linear model, the expected sales in 2021 are supposed to increase by 19%, but then in 2022, there is a decrease of 2.7%, followed by another decrease in 2023 of 2.77%. The linear model was the best, I would say, storyteller. The pessimistic and the optimistic models, they were slightly extreme. So the future forecast was, I would say, more moderate. And the increases in sales, they seem pretty, I would say, consistent with the past year. And they also seemed very consistent compared to the past 10 years. So like I said, some increases in sales, some decreases in sales, but overall the variation is not, I would say, greatly huge. So this is why I chose the future forecast to be modeled by the linear line, by the linear trend. And this is the income statement using the linear model. We can see that sales are increasing, then they slightly decrease, and then they slightly decrease again. Cost of goods sold increase, decrease, decrease. Gross profit is overall, we can see that it's overall decreasing. And operating expense, it started high and then it's getting low and low, and the operating income again starts higher and then it just gets lower and lower. And there are some items that I carried over, like the restructuring and impairment costs, and interest income, and interest expense. So for those three items, as I mentioned before, the variance was too big and I decided just to carry it over. And with regard to interest income and interest expense, especially interest expense, I don't know how much the company is going to borrow next year or in the next 3 years. So I just decided to keep it constant, 19,000. The same goes with interest income. With other non-operating income, which are non-related operating expense. They're not related to the core, I would say, business. It's something that's outside the business. So I just, suspected that it would just stay somewhat the same, 986. And we can see that the net income, as I mentioned before, it goes up to 88,000, but then it just keep on decreasing and getting lower. And this is another figure that I would like to share. It basically shows the percentage change in the income statement. We can see that in 2019, there was a somewhat increase in some of the items, but overall, the company didn't do extremely well. Same goes for 2020 and for 2022 and 2023. And in fact, only in 2021, the company's net income increased. And this is the future forecast. So we are predicting that sales and overall net income will increase in 2021, but then there's going to be a decline in the next 2 years. And it's very consistent with the past 10 years data. I provided it on Excel, and obviously I discussed it in Word, but this is just to show how there is a fluctuation in the company with regard to sales. It's important mentioning that it's with regard to sales. I do believe that fluctuations are expected. As I said again and again, the company is experiencing ups and downs in its sales, but I believe it has to do with the nature of the market, with the nature of the industry, and it does not necessarily say anything about the company's management and operations. And why I'm saying it is because the company is a tobacco company, and it basically depends on people, on customers who smoke. So if sometimes customers smoke more, sometimes they smoke less, obviously it affects sales. And I mentioned in the Word file that back, I think it was when World War II occurred, demand for cigarettes increased because there was a lot of pressure and stress and there was chaos around the world. Demand for cigarettes increased. And I think that COVID might possibly benefit the company because it's pretty much a similar situation. There is a somewhat chaos around the world. People are working from home, or maybe they're getting fired. They don't feel well. They are a little bit depressed. Maybe they cannot live life as they used to before the pandemic. So there is a good chance that demand for cigarettes will increase, and maybe sales in the next years will somehow increase. And I could not include it in my forecast because it's still something that we cannot fully comprehend and utilize. So I'm just saying that this forecast is solely based on sales past 10 years, but there are some factors like COVID-19 that can obviously impact the future forecast. I do believe that the company is in a good position. As I mentioned earlier, it has a 45 um, consecutive years of stock growth, of dividend growth, which is good. And the stock value has increased by more than 1,000%. And it's also provided in the world file. We can see that the company is pretty much doing well throughout its history. And those fluctuations, they might be expected in such an industry, the tobacco industry. People smoke more, people smoke less. The company cannot do anything about it. And as far as I'm concerned, looking at the company's past data, history, and all of that, the company is a pretty stable company, and it has one of the largest customers, which is Philip Morris. I believe it's the largest cigarette manufacturer in the world, so it also casts light on the company's performance. And this is all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed and learned something. And that's it. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you watching. Bye-bye.